In the realm of bird drawing, there are so many different species of birds to draw inspiration from, but perhaps one of the most iconic shapes is that of the sparrowbird. The sparrowbird is also a really good drawing exercise because of its similar body type and shape to that of various other bird species, making it a really good benchmark and framework in order to understand how a bird is formed through a drawing process. So with that being said, hey guys, my name is Matt. Welcome to another video by artincontext.org where we explore various art-related topics, and in today's tutorial we will be covering one of a few birds that we'll be looking at, and that is how to draw a sparrow. So this tutorial is broken down into a process that is done with some simple drawing tools such as ballpoint pen, markers, eraser sharpeners, and just some graphite pencils. We also do incorporate some colored pencil work, so with that being said, you can kind of use those mediums. However, you can kind of follow this process and use what you have available to you. Now, the way in which we start this process of drawing the sparrow is we first want to start by a simple sketch of the sparrow. So we can begin by drawing a very light pencil sketch of the sparrow. We must first establish the basic fundamental shapes that encapsulate the form of the sparrow itself. So this could be described as a larger circle of the body and a smaller oval shape for the head. The idea is that as we kind of develop it from its fundamental and elementary shapes, we can then refine until we come to this realistic representation of the bird. From there, we want to start refining the sparrow sketch by forming the bird within its basic shapes. But otherwise, the beak of a sparrow can be described as a short and spear-headed shape with two segments that establish the upper and lower parts of the beak. When it comes to the body of the sparrow, it is quite rounded, as if the bird has a large chest or belly, and this is quite iconic of the bird. This larger belly shape does curve towards the underbelly area of the bird and flows towards the back end where the feathers will kind of be resting. The feathers of the sparrow appear quite small on the bird when its wings are rested, so this can be described kind of as small arrowhead shapes that point in a downward direction and sit on the upper section of the sparrow's larger body. The eyes of the sparrow are quite rounded and are placed in the middle of the head. The eyes are also in line with the beak, so that's something important to note. We really want to make sure that we capture that kind of horizontal plane along which the eyes and the beak are placed, so we can use the beak as a reference point for the placement of the eyes. Once we have a general sketch of the sparrow outlined and established, we can now start to be a little bit more creative with our line work to establish a feathery quality within the drawing of the bird. So now we're going to kind of start working in some light details into our sparrow drawing. As we add features to the sparrow sketch, we can start to kind of create these segments within the feathers. So another thing to note is that the sparrow does have these various segments within its feathers, creating this layering effect that kind of seems as if it's stacked on top of one another. We can also start to add smaller lines that flow in rows along the body of the sparrow. Sparrows almost have this kind of dotted stripy aesthetic, which is quite unique to the bird's identity. So we want to sketch some light lines to establish this feature, and that way we can also color them in the next step. Now we're going to move on to adding a base layer of color to the sparrow. So using a set of brown pencils, preferably, we want to now start adding in some color to the sparrow sketch. So sparrows do have an array of brown tonal values and are striped with darker brown colors. We want to establish the lighter layers of brown first, which we can then darken slowly as we progress with kind of adding in these darker tonal values. You always want to start with lighter tonal values when you are coloring in a subject matter. That way you have more control over how dark or light your subject will be. So starting near the head is a good suggestion. We want to just simply take our time to color in the eyes. So with the eyes, we want to make sure that we darken the pupil and the iris while trying to keep a little light tone to establish a sense of highlight within the eye. Again, the eyes of birds tend to be quite glassy, so they do have these little reflective qualities in them. We can also add color through the use of line work. Again, this will help to emphasize the feathery quality of the sparrow. Line work is a really good shading technique or drawing technique that can kind of emulate or kind of represent that quality of feathers within a bird drawing. So that's something to remember. And you can do this again with your brown pencils, building up those line works, and then slowly we can darken them. So you do really want to take your time around the head area, as this is where the details of the bird are quite delicate and tricky, especially when coloring in the eye. We really want to try our best to leave a few little highlights to establish a reflective quality to represent that glassy surface of the eyeball. Now think of coloring the bird as layering in lines of color using the sketch to guide your coloring process. However, we also want to build our colors from light to dark, once again, really emphasizing that point, which means that we want to make sure that we work from light to darker colors. Again, we are incorporating these colors through the process of line work to kind of also maintain that feathery texture within our bird drawing. The sparrow does have spots that sit on the belly, so we also want to use our lighter brown pencils to establish these patterns in the belly area. We also want to make sure that we give color to the layered segments within the feathers of the sparrow as well. We can now start kind of using darker browns to distinguish the layers within the feathers at this point within our sparrow drawing. Again, the sparrow does have various segments within the actual wing feathers as they sit on top of one another, and we really want to emphasize that quality by creating these little gradients that shift between each of the layers to kind of distinguish them from one another. The feathers can also start to seem quite messy in a way, which is also okay. So this is why we want to use line work, as it is kind of a flowing visual quality that creates the effect of feathers and works really well to emulate that very unique texture within birds. So we do want to make sure that our lines do flow kind of in uniform in a singular direction, and that is because when feathers rest on a bird, they tend to be quite densely compact and kind of flow downward in this singular direction. So we just want to bear that in mind. But otherwise, we want to take our time establishing these lighter tonal values with color. We always, when working with color or trying to integrate color into a subject matter, you always want to establish them from lighter tonal values to darker tonal values, and then you can enhance those details with a darker medium, which brings us to the next step, and that is adding some pen lines to the sparrow. So once we have established the basic foundational layer of color, we now want to start incorporating some pen lines into the drawing to bring out more contrast and definition. Again, we simply do this by applying lines with our pens and using the pencil sketch to assist us. So the idea of kind of incorporating these lines is to really take our time and be patient, because we do want to make a lot of these little strokes that emphasize the quality of shorter feathers, and then we can elongate them in the wing section to emulate the quality of longer feathers. So try to start from the head area again and slowly work your way down the bird, making sure that you use the pencil lines to help you place the pen lines. When working around the head of the bird, we also want to make sure that the lines are shorter to establish the smaller little tufts of feathers, but the sparrow has both long and short feathers, once again in different areas of the body. So we want to make sure that we keep the line shorter near the head area and longer near the belly area to distinguish between the various feather lengths. The more time we take in slowly adding in these little lines with a pen, we will start to see how this creates an effect of short feathers in the drawing, but we'll also start to see how the darkening of these lines start to give more contrast and a vivid quality and a shadow-like quality to the actual feather texture within our sparrow drawing. But otherwise, guys, it really is just a matter of spending time near the head area. That's a really important point that I just want to drive home, and that you guys really kind of take with you, because this is where a lot of delicate details are, and it's really easy to mess up when you are working with a medium such as a pen. So it does contain finer details, and this is especially true for the eye, as it surrounds or is surrounded by scales, and that we can represent again with some pen lines, but we do just want to be delicate around those areas. We can also darken the tip of the beak to establish this idea of shadowing on the surface of the beak, and that's just another way to kind of emphasize tonal variation within the beak, which ultimately emphasizes the three-dimensionality of our sparrow drawing. We can also work with ballpoint pens specifically and micron pens specifically to have a variety of line thicknesses. So you can use micron pens for finer, smaller strokes, but then you can use ballpoint pen to kind of work in some general smooth shading, because it works quite similar to that of a graphite pencil. So working with these two mediums in tandem to create larger surface areas of shadow, and then working with micron pen to create these smaller delicate details maybe around the eyes and the scales and so on, is just a good suggestion in terms of what type of tools you can use to really capture these features as beautifully as possible. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at how we can add in some contextualizing features. So now we can add in legs of the sparrow to establish its position within space and how it is actually placed in an environment. The legs are quite simple, as they stem out from the bottom of the sparrow in a diagonal fashion, each with 4 claws. The claws or the digits, whatever you'd like to call them, are relatively the same in size, with the middle claw being slightly longer than that to the rest, compared to the rest. We can also draw a structure beneath the sparrow to define an object on which the sparrow is placed. But otherwise, at this point, our sparrow drawing is technically complete. However, we may want to use our brown pencils one last time to make some further colorations within the bird slightly more vivid. We simply want to work over the areas where the colored sections that we have established beforehand can assist us now. And this part is kind of more a matter of thinking about how you can enhance those colorations by working in some light pencil colored mark making to kind of emphasize the details such as the spots and so on within your sparrow drawing. But otherwise, try to maintain the stroke action of each line as you continue to place color, still emphasizing that quality of feather or a feathery texture. We can also use our pens at this point in tandem with our colored pencils simply to work in details that need a little bit more fine-tuning, more contrast and distinct lines. But otherwise, at this point, we are simply trying to make sure that all the areas of the sparrow bird drawing have been attended to with color and some line work. But otherwise, guys, that is the simple and easy process of how to draw a sparrow. Now, I hope this video was really helpful and informative. Very simple, very easy to draw, very fun bird, and sets a really good framework for other bird drawings in terms of understanding general shape, refining it, and then enhancing it with some finer details. If you did like this video, please let us know in the comment section below. But otherwise, some key concepts to remember. You always want to make sure you work out the sketch, the early sketch, the very light sketch as best you can, because this is going to establish the blueprints or the foundations on which you can refine or make a more refined sketch. The other thing is you want to consider subtleties of light and shadow. So this is where we can kind of think about how a darker medium like penwork can be used to create strokes of lines to enhance shadowing within the feathers and other areas of the bird. But otherwise, most importantly, just remain patient and take your time, and consider how your drawing tools can be used effectively in these different stages. But if you are interested in similar related videos, whether it is bird drawing or drawing of animals or creatures, please do let us know in the comment section below. And please show us some love by liking the video and subscribing. This helps us to grow the channel, which ultimately enables us to make more art related content for you guys, keep the channel running, and share with you guys some cool art related content. But otherwise, that is it from me today. Thanks again for tuning in. Until next time, cheers.